Letty, let's start with you. Before the ERA passed, what was your life like?
I was a college graduate. I worked on my own in New York, lived by my own in the village, got married, had 3 children. But in 1970, I discovered feminism, or had my consciousness raised. However, I was also trying to conform to the most conventional stereotypes. I baked bread so I could make stuffing for my turkey. I decorated. I had 3 children. I was very careful about what I dressed them in. I carved pumpkins with them. But I had also a career. My career was in book publishing before I published my first book in 1970.
Could you get a credit card?
Absolutely not, unless I brought my husband along to sign for it.
Could you get a mortgage?
I could not get a mortgage unless I brought my husband or father to sign for it.
So what turned you into a feminist?
What turned me into a feminist was publishing my first book, How to Make It in a Man's World, which was not a feminist book. I was unenlightened. I only was reporting on my own life and what the struggle was for me. And I functioned well because I was young and cute, and they'd expected nothing from somebody who looked like me. And I did do very, very well. But
being young and cute was a big factor.
Big factor. And I kind of played to it. I wore mini skirts, you know. You did a charade as a woman. You had to use your, quote, femininity, which was already such a stereotype that very often it had nothing to do with you, but that was who you had to present. And you also became as demanding as you possibly could be of yourself in the work situation. I was supporting myself.
When you were starting out, what were your expectations as a young woman in terms of career, financial independence, importance in the work world?
What I hoped I would get was a husband and a set of sterling silver, quite frankly, because that's what all my girlfriends were getting. Their mamas were going shopping with them and all of that. I saw what was expected. And in fact, I got married 4 years later, and my husband was fine with me working. I loved my job. So I'd never confronted the moment when, wait a minute, you know, why are you such a high-powered woman? It's really annoying, until I gave birth to the twins. And then I did what I thought I was expected to do. I quit my job, and I had a farewell party, and I stayed home for 6 months with 2 babies, and I didn't have enough to do. So I asked my boss if I could come back, and he told me he had never filled the job because he knew I would. So my husband and I would carry this box, and the 2 babies were in it, and I would put them under my desk because sometimes my childcare arrangement had fallen through. But that was one of the images that stayed in my mind when the feminist movement started to break through my awareness. I had gotten a lot of breaks, and then suddenly I'm reading about the rest of women and how they were getting 59 cents on the dollar, and I suddenly wondered, well, what am I getting on the dollar? You know, and started being a little bit troubled by all that. In 1971, I had started a column in the Ladies' Home Journal, their first feminist column, called The Working Woman. Betty Friedan, of all people, calls me on the phone and asks if I'll go and help found the National Women's Political Caucus. So in July 1971, I did. I went down with her. I met Gloria Steinem. We all worked on the statement of purpose together, and at the end of that, Gloria said, would you like to come back to New York and help a little group of us start Ms.?
When did you begin considering yourself and understanding yourself to be a feminist?
It took a while to translate into my actually owning the label, and then I really owned it big time. It didn't come naturally because it was like a fish doesn't know the water it's swimming in. You know, we had to literally tune ourselves into what we had taken for granted as a kind of either low-grade oppression or real hostility and discomfort and lack of safety. Being afraid to, you know, walk on the streets. You know, it used to be, if you remember, there was a Take Back the Night movement because we didn't own the night. If we went out at night, we were just fair game.
How much hostility did you encounter in the workplace and just out and about in society?
The sex discrimination really hit me hard when I became an executive. And I would walk into a room for a meeting that I was going to run, and somebody would ask me to go get the coffee, literally, or talk over me until they figured out who I was, you know. An elevator with a man was a dangerous place because they could do anything to you, and there was no Violence Against Women Act. There was no Anti-Discrimination Act in the 1960s or early 60s. So I was attacked in elevators, and when I go to a book publishing conference in Washington, D.C., I was afraid to go to my room because the hotel halls were, hazardous.
Your understanding of what the ERA was meant to achieve, what was that?
It wasn't about equality for women. It was about equality. It was an amendment to add to the United States equality that refused to accept discrimination based on sex.
Did you see it?
It's got 24 words in it. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged on the basis of sex. It doesn't say for women. So let me say, immediately we were very glad to be able to support men, for example, who got the raw deal in alimony, in custody rights.
Were you naive, do you think, in what you thought would happen?
I think I was totally naive about the time it would take to prove to this country that equality didn't exist.
Did you see the ERA as an enforcement mechanism or a kind of a manifesto?
I think it was a manifesto in the sense that it was a wake-up call that our Constitution really had neglected women. Not just neglected. Our founders consciously chose not to include women. Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, he was a founder, obviously, wrote a famous letter, "Remember the ladies when you're writing this document," the Declaration of Independence and eventually the Constitution of the United States. And there's evidence they chose not to. So this was a failure of the promise of democracy. And we thought once it was clarified, it would be sort of, click, I get it, and things would be fixed.
There were people who argued, well, you don't need the Equal Rights Amendment
Yes,
because,
right.
look,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
legislation, there are court cases.
Right. Yeah, the 1963 Equal Opportunity Act, that's a good example. 1963, yet 59 cents on the dollar, right? Today, 81 cents on the dollar. So we're talking, what, 60-something years, and we're only up to 81 cents?
It's gone down 80 point something.
Oh, you see, you're
in
ahead of me.
2024.
You're ahead of me. Yeah, so we're going backwards. And laws are laws. Then they go to the Supreme Court when they're being disputed, and the Supreme Court makes a judgment based on their constitutionality, and we're not in it.
Define feminism as you inherited the mantle.
Equal opportunity for everyone. That's all it meant. It didn't mean women are better. It didn't mean men are bad. It didn't mean that we have to burn it down, although I guess there were some things my mom would like to have burned down. It just meant everybody deserves the same chances.
Did it ever mean to you that you could only be a professional at the expense of being a wife and mother or someone who was more traditional in her personal life?
It meant to me every option was available and that it was possible to have it all. I mean, there really was this sense that it was possible to have both a satisfying career and a satisfying and very rich and committed home life in which you were present. Not every job allows for that, and I came to realize that over time. Flexibility is a luxury. One thing that really became clear to me was that it was important to have my own life and my own thing beyond my children. That's not true for every woman, but it was for me in the sense that my kids actually, I think, took pride in my being a professional. I was able to share my life with them to some degree. As a writer, I was able to work with them on their writing, and that was great. And there was a time where I said, I want to volunteer in their schools. I was showing up at lunchtime to be like a proctor, and my kids were like, what are you doing here? Why are you here during our lunch day? I mean, that was their day at school. They were happy to see me at the end of the day. And I also feel like your kids grow up, and I'm very aware that there are a lot of women I know who dropped out of the workplace and then getting back in was difficult later. And so I was grateful to have kind of just kept the ground running under me professionally, so that when they started to have their own lives and they were no longer my main focus, I had something that was, all mine, and something that gave me a sense of self and identity beyond them.
Did you feel that you were being paid comparably to men in your profession?
I've always wondered about that because salaries are still really kept private, and you really don't know what your peers are earning. I'm not great about asking for more, and I still feel as if there are ways in which that really plagues women. I can speak for myself, but I think it's true of other women too, of sort of taking business personally, whereas men don't. They can just have the harder conversations without kind of getting hurt or getting nervous. Feeling on the line. That has not been my experience. It's very difficult for me to say I deserve more.
Did you come of age believing that you had to fight to break down barriers?
I kind of didn't. I have to say that I realized the fight was ongoing and there was a distance left to go, but I really was in that smooth spot of like they had greased the wheels and I was riding them.
Now, when you were raising Maya, what were the lessons about women's rights and women's situation that you tried to instill in her or to pass on to her?
I didn't have to articulate it in a very kind of conscious way. I feel like she was going to pick up the messages based on how we lived. She saw me as a professional person who went to work every day and came home to her. I was also in a marriage with a man who was intent upon really very consciously having a 50-50 division of things.
Did you ever have any kind of advice from a woman's point of view for Maya?
I have tried to make it clear to her that, she can choose any path. She can be, very, committed to work and excited about that. I think that maybe one member of a couple sometimes needs to be more flexible than another for it to work. I think it's tough if you have two hard-driving professionals with less flexible schedules to be as around for your kids as you might want to. So it could be the man who's more primary at home, it could be the woman, but I kind of feel like something's got to give.
When you think of the word feminist, what's your definition of feminist? And are you one?
Yeah. Yes, I am a feminist. I think when I grew up, I thought more about feminist than feminism. And I think that maybe even more than in your generation, there is a pretty widespread negative perception of feminists as angry. Wanting to burn it all down and wanting to kind of just get angry and burn their bras. That is still a perception that I think that really exists. And I think I sort of rejected that because I was just that's not me. I'm not angry. I'm happy. I'm all good. Even reading up on things this week and experiencing my grandma's work and everything, I think this idea of equality is exactly right. Feminism for the woman was something that I was kind of I don't want to be seen as special or different than my peers. I want to be just Maya for her merit and her brain and her accolades, and not Maya for the fact that she's a female.
Were you aware of the ERA? Did you pay attention to the ERA? Did you think it had a potential role in your life?
No, not at all. And finding out that actually it's not written into the Constitution that women, there's been laws that have been passed, but, an executive order can seriously challenge something like that.
And what happened when you came to that realization?
I came to this show. I was like, I'll do it. I'm gonna, that's crazy. I think that equality should be written into the Constitution, of course. And when I studied the opposition to it and I watched, the Good Morning America interview with Phyllis Schlafly and Betty Friedan, and I was like, I'm really curious, what is the arguments against this? Why are people saying that this might be problematic? And it was literally, arguments by women from what I experienced in my, little study session was we actually want more than equality, right? Like we feel like we're equal. You know, that's what she was saying. I'm all good. I went to law school and I'm in law school right now, but also like I don't want to be drafted, and I don't want my homemaking ability to be taken away, or I don't want to subscribe to the same laws and needs as men. And I was like, you should, because we should be equal.
So it doesn't bother you that supposed protections for women and a traditional way of life might be affected?
Well, I don't think it would. I don't think it would be. Why would it be affected? I really tried to understand this, and I feel like something like equality gives you the right to choose.
Do you have a sense that you take for granted a feeling of comfort as a woman in today's society and in today's work world?
I think people take for granted things that they didn't have to struggle for. I am a white woman in New York City, and there are I think people have different experiences depending on where they grow up and who their parents are and what their socioeconomic status is and the opportunities they were given.
Have you experienced any kind of sexism or something that the little antenna go up and say, I'm being discriminated against in some way?
No, I have not felt discriminated against.
Well, about your work,
Yeah.
we looked at the organization chart and we looked at the pictures of all the people and their titles, and there is a vast difference in the number of women who hold key roles. Most of the women are in lower level positions.
Yes.
That struck me as blatant.
Yeah.
But generally true.
Especially
Okay, so
in
I work in finance. You're right. Like I've never worked for a company with a CEO that was a woman, and I don't know that many. But my hope and my expectation, frankly, is that will change. And that will change because, the younger generations that like I am in want that and knew that they could want that most importantly, and the doors were broken down for them to go after it.
Do you want something different, you think, than what your mother wanted when she was starting out and your grandmother fought for?
I want what my mom had. I really do. Like she's at the top of her field right now. I want to do that too.
Letty, what do you think went wrong in the ratification of the ERA?
There was an enormous system that was protecting turf.
And the idea that it's some kind of zero-sum game where if you give women sort of more equality or opportunity, you're taking something from men.
Do you think, all of you, the perception that feminists were strident, that they were loud, that they burned their bras, that they were pushy, that affected the inability of the ERA to be ratified within the time limit?
What I've realized is sometimes it feels like, oh, do we have to be this loud? And then you realize change doesn't happen otherwise.
Right.
It's those people who are the mosquitoes on these issues that they finally start to shift. It is these sort of annoyingly loud people taking the megaphone that finally forces a culture to take notice. And the other thing I would say is there's a degree of like instinctive resistance that women have to overcome. If you are too aggressive and ambitious and maybe want to be a CEO, you're often considered the bitch. There's a real sense of like even women taking down women for wanting to necessarily get ahead or maybe being kind of a hard ass in the workplace. There's a lot working against women that we can't even name. And I think that kind of, bubbles up inside all of us. And I think that's a huge obstacle that it's very hard to isolate and it's very hard to combat. Like, I have to say that I had dinner with my college roommates last night, 2 of them, and one of them made this point, which is that men are very happy to have young women around and help them out until they start to get to be their peers and actually compete with them.
Thank you.
And then that attitude might change.
I had male mentors every single step of the way in the 1960s. And when I became vice president of a company, a lot of attitudes changed. But they do love They love helping the girls,
Till they start to
especially if
threaten.
they're young and pretty.
Pretty.
So reductive.
It's not reductive because, suddenly, why does it suddenly change? Why does it suddenly change that we're a threat?
Right.
How much backsliding in terms of where the world of women is now and where it's going?
I was born under FDR, and I don't want to die under a regime like the one that's ruling this nation right now. But the fact that, as one woman said when she last held up a placard during a recent pro-choice march, she said, "I can't believe I have to do this all over again." Older women cannot believe that what we believed we had accomplished can be eroded so easily. And that's why the pro-ERA people are not giving up. Because if it isn't in the Constitution, for example, the right to vote, you need a separate amendment. For instance, the 19th that got us the right to vote. And we need equality to be, baked in to who America is. And right now it's being baked out. We've been scrubbed out of the Smithsonian. Women who were airline pilots during the war, women who discovered certain things in science, scrubbed out. There's no interest now in reifying and celebrating the accomplishments of women or people of color. So I am so grateful to any young person who's out in the streets now, who's lobbying legislatures, who's organizing, who is running for office. I'm 87, and I'm not going to start all over again. I'm going to do what I can, but I'm not going to have the energy or the time to do this all over again. I'm also going to not have the spirit to start from so far back, just from so far back, when I really, I believe this country was capable of better.
But when you look at us, aren't you we've come so far?
Yeah, when I look at the you that's you and some of your cohort, yes, I am counting on them. I'm counting on them.